always need more compassion. You know, I mean, it just, you know, if that was now and you know, so Mo had arrived here and then was shipped off to Rwanda, I mean, they would have just killed him. The people he was with. You know, I dread to think what would have happened. You know, you've got to show more compassion because, you know, the traffickers treat people like cattle. You know, we have to treat them with dignity when they arrive here. It's important, and you know, you can't just send people off. You know, because you know, you've got to assume innocent until guilty. So you know, if you send them off to Rwanda, you know, what about the people like Mo, the ones who are genuine asylum seekers?
Well,
can't do that.
Actually, Lowry, if Mo did come here today as a 9-year-old, he wouldn't be sent to Rwanda. He's a child. Potentially, though, the woman he came with.
Well,
I
want to say, is the action going to be taken against the family who brought him in? Because they have committed a crime. And so he obviously was really frightened and couldn't say anything because he was worried about his family. But actually, that's the people I would like to see have some action taken against them. I think, you know, every story is heartrending when you hear it. Most British people do have compassion, but also we look at the bigger picture here, which was how was this family able to bring somebody in on false papers? When I travel to South Africa, which I do once a year, if I take my children in without their father, so I'm the mother, but I have to have an affidavit with me signed by the father and their birth certificates to get them into South Africa. When I come back to the UK, I have to carry birth certificates with me because my children don't have my surname. So there are checks done. Why was this able to happen? And that's what we need to ask the question about, I think.
It feels to me almost, this is an odd comparison to make, but it's a bit like with cars, right? No matter how much better the security of cars get, criminals can always seem to find a way around it. And I completely agree with you. And I mean, the answer really is to, you know, the countries they come from are so poor, there's so much difficulty. I mean, you know, the fact that people even consider doing something like this, you know, it's kind of, and I know that's the bigger picture.
I think that what shocks me is that in this case, it doesn't look like Mo's family were paying for traffickers to take him for a better life. They were in a situation. They were in a situation where they had all these children, the father was dead, there was no way to make a living, and therefore somebody said, oh, I'll take your son to a better life. That family decided they wanted a slave and they handpicked him and brought him to the UK as a slave. And that to me is really, this is not some business, this is people who think it's okay to have a child who's not yours, who take them away from their family, threaten them. That's shocking, shocking behaviour, and that's why that family need to be prosecuted.
No, I agree with you, but I think the question is why are gangs of child traffickers predominantly from very poor countries? I'm not aware of that many child traffickers working from this country. It's because those countries are so poor, in such a terrible state, that people are pushed to this as a job almost. It's you know.
So reading this article, I read the article in the Mirror, and it's so harrowing. Literally a lump came in my throat just reading his story. So, as Larry was saying, he came here expecting to maybe join family members.
Yes, he had an address with him, didn't he?
Had an address.
Family members. And
the woman who brought him
tore it up, didn't she?
She said to him, if you say anything, you won't get any food. You have to work for me, looking after my children, looking after the home. And in the end, this is what got me. What he would do as a 9-year-old child, as he said, the woman tore up the contact details, said to be quiet, you're never going to see your family again. He'll go into the bathroom, lock himself in and start to cry. That's okay, I just need to just calm down a moment.
But his amazing friend of his at school, the family took Mo in, didn't they? And his sports teacher was the one who managed to do all the paperwork. So people, you know, I think British people are so often criticised for, we're told if you believe in any kind of border policy, you're racist. Actually, British people are not like that. Most people are kind and caring. And those people saw that he was in trouble and they really deserve our kind of thanks and our admiration. They helped him. And also Mo's strength of spirit, that he managed to go through that. Imagine carrying that secret for all these years. I mean, there is an odd thing that he's Sir Mo, but that's not his name. But he said he's going to decide to keep Mo Farah because that's. But I was quite surprised the way he didn't just say, I'd like to now be my real name. I haven't walked in those shoes. I can't imagine what that's like.
I mean, if I didn't admire him already, to now that we know what he's been through, to achieve what he's achieved. Admiration's just gone through the roof. It's incredible.
Let's speak to now Andrew Wallace. Now, he's the CEO of Unseen, which is a modern slavery and exploitation charity. Andrew, good to have you with us this morning. Just so many questions, really, just such shock revelations from Mo. And it seems there are people who did know. There was his PE teacher at school who helped uncover what he was going through, helped Mo out of this. Did you know anything about this? This is your area of expertise, really?
No, I mean, when the story broke yesterday, that was the first that we knew of it. But unfortunately, Mo's story, and I want to acknowledge his huge courage in bringing forth his story, but his story is very, very typical of what happens. You know, last year we saw in the UK nearly 5,500 victims, child victims of trafficking and modern slavery. And some of them, came into the country exactly like Mo did, under false pretenses. They'd been deceived. They were then moved, and then into a situation of exploitation, and often coming in with what appears like illegal paperwork, but it was legal in order to get them into the country. So these issues of smuggling and illegal entry and human trafficking are very closely aligned, but they are separate issues that we have to deal with.
Do you think Mo's story, just pointing to the background behind what goes on when children particularly are trafficked anywhere but here in the UK, do you think it should change people's views on illegal immigrants? Should people be more compassionate?
I hope it does. And the sad fact is that, we've had a government for the last few years that has deliberately wanted to conflate these issues of smuggling and trafficking and of illegal entry into the country. And what we know from even those that have come, as the government would say, illegally entered the country, when they go through the immigration process, we find the vast majority are legitimate refugees or have a legitimate claim for asylum. And some of them are also victims of trafficking. So it's really difficult issue that the government is having to deal with, but just having this carte blanche response, which is, okay, well, we'll wash our hands of it, we'll send everybody to Rwanda, is not the correct response. It should be, we need to understand each individual story. We need to understand if they are victims of trafficking. But the problem with victims of trafficking is it's very rare for them to self-identify, or if they're under the control of somebody else, they don't feel that they have the freedom to speak up. And, we go back to Mo's story. It was only after years that he exhibited the signs and at least had an alert teacher that spotted the signs in order to say, is what this child is saying and presenting as, is this person a victim of trafficking? And thankfully that teacher enabled Mo to get out of that situation, because he was in what we call domestic servitude, which is often the most hidden and the most difficult to uncover.
Andrew, the government, somebody like Priti Patel, she could argue that if they stop traffickers, they could have potentially stopped this woman from bringing Mo here to the UK in the first place if maybe they had tough policies in place, such as the threat of being sent to Rwanda. What would you say to something like that?
Well, all the way through as the Nationality and Borders, it's now an act, but as the Nationality and Borders Bill was going through Parliament, every single entity, whether it was the third sector or policing or lawyers, was saying to the government, this is not the route to take in tackling this. We need to have safe routes set up so that people that are fleeing or have refugee status can get to this country safely. And we need to have in place the identification processes so that we can find those victims of trafficking if they are found in this country. And let's not forget that there are also thousands of victims of trafficking that are UK nationals in this country as well. So it's not just a problem that's coming here. And then the second thing I would say to the Home Secretary is, we've wasted 10 years in not focusing enough on how we prevent this. What are the things that drive people to come to this country and drive trafficking? And the thing that drives trafficking and modern slavery is the demand for cheap services, cheap labor, and cheap goods. And those are the things that we should be focusing on. So I will back the government when it says we're really going to step up in terms of preventing this in the first place. But let's not have a knee-jerk response or a wolf whistle response, which is we're going to send everybody back, because actually we will then be sending potential victims back to Rwanda. So not only will they have been exploited by the individual that's exploiting them, you then have a state that's going to further exploit them by sending them to Rwanda.
OK. Andrew Wallace from the modern slavery charity Unseen. Really good talking to you this morning off the back of Mo Farah's revelation. And interesting, actually, if this policy was in place, it maybe could have helped Mo Farah from coming here, but then we wouldn't have Mo Farah, Team GB, Olympic gold medalist.